Middlebury College allows a BLM protest despite its strict COVID restrictions. A CUNY professor calls on the UN to step in if Trump wins, even if the win's legit. And a campus senator is impeached for a pro-Trump tweet from 1 year ago. My name is Andrew Covert, and welcome to Campus Review. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the news in a second, but first, do you enjoy getting your campus news from a conservative source and also love cool hoodies, t-shirts, and mugs? Why not check out our merch store for great deals that help support great independent journalism? So, Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont decided to allow a BLM protest that had over 500 people in attendance, despite the fact that they had strict COVID rules that don't allow more than 10 people to gather on or off campus. This was allowed to happen after 22 students were suspended for gathering off campus together. Thanks to reporting by Dean Barker, one of our campus correspondents from Virginia, we have a pretty revealing story. So, this kind of protest is nothing new for 2020 really, and had what I have to imagine is a fairly typical setup to these kind of things. According to the Middlebury campus, which is the campus newspaper, the event came together within 24 hours after Kyla Thomas saw that the grand jury of the Breonna Taylor case had decided not to indict and posted Instagram messages calling for the rally. Now, what makes this messed up is that afterwards, with around 500 people in attendance, the campus staff actually supported and helped coordinate the event. As much as the paper tries to say that there was social distancing and that proper care was taken to ensure the protocol was followed, they kind of made the mistake of posting pictures that tell you everything you really need to know. People were not socially distanced, and the masks they were wearing were pretty much all cloth. Now, as best as I can tell, the evidence on masks is still pretty shaky, and that's according to the CDC's report, and that's assuming that you're wearing the nice N95 ones and that you wear it properly. I hate to tell you this, but if you don't wear a mask properly, then it doesn't work. And as a college student who works on campus, I can tell you that y'all ain't wearing them properly. And what makes this blatantly hypocritical is that the campus not 2 weeks beforehand had suspended 22 students for violating its guidelines. Now, this is pretty par for the course with college campuses though. I saw back in August, 36 students had been suspended for gathering off campus by Purdue University. Then later that same weekend, there was a BLM protest that, similar to this one, claimed to have proper social distancing measures, contrary to their own photographic evidence. Now, to be fair, those students did have their suspensions revoked, but not before they had to appeal the ruling and fight for fair treatment. Honestly though, as a college student and especially as a conservative, what has bugged me the most about this entire school year is the way the campuses pay lip service to quote-unquote science as being their guiding principle, shut down the classrooms and social areas, all while charging you the same tuition, mind you. But then as soon as they're accused of being unwoke by their liberal betters, they kowtow and allow massive protests full of people yelling and chanting. Apparently, as long as you shout, "Say her name" loud enough, that will be enough to keep yours off the COVID death certificate. Seriously, according to them, wanting to go and attend the classes you paid for is killing grandma, but an on-campus gathering for social justice is like a temporary vaccine. I guarantee you that if you tried to start a pro-Trump rally at any of those campuses, you'd be shut down immediately with your Twitter DMs full of messages calling you a white supremacist. See, but that's the magic of BLM. They managed to take a phrase which is obviously true and turn it into a neo-Marxist political movement focused on completely uprooting and destroying any societal institution that shows any disparity of outcome. To borrow from Ben Shapiro, they've juiced it up with semantic overload. That is the only possible explanation for how a rally that was supposed to protest a jury ruling could turn to something as radical as defund public safety. I kid you not, according to the Middlebury campus article, they interviewed a student named Luca Bowen and said, quote, "Bowen also advocated for the college to defund public safety, which he believes exists solely to, in his words, harass black students." Now, that is a pretty hefty accusation to be thrown around lightly, and in case you couldn't already guess, he doesn't cite any evidence for his claim. Neither does the Middlebury campus, but nonetheless, the article is filled with references to the murder of Breonna Taylor, which no, it wasn't. As well as the need for, quote, "you white individuals to look inside yourselves and figure out what you can do to help without waiting to be asked." Presumably meaning we need to chant the slogans, raise our fists, and then racism will be magically cured. But as outlandish as that all sounds, these policies will have real-world consequences, and the defunding of public safety would be a tragedy. Personally, I think that would be a horrible, horrible policy for a campus that reported 17 rapes on campus and 10 in the student housing in 2018, and 19 and 16, respectively, in 2017. But I suppose all of those women, including the women of color, will rest comfortably knowing that their safety is being compromised for the sake of virtue signaling garbage. Personally, I'm a 250-pound 19-year-old man, and even I try to be careful when I'm walking across campus at 1 a.m. I can't even imagine what it would be like to weigh half that, realize someone is following you, just make it to the blue light, and then immediately be sent to voicemail while hearing the footsteps behind you. But ladies, I'm sure your sacrifice will be well noted in the great fight for racial equality that is defund public safety. I should also mention that if you want to read any of the original articles we talk about, check the description for links. Now, before we move on to our next topic, did you know that Campus Reform puts out videos often? Be sure to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss our Man on the Street videos where we talk to college students and find out where they actually stand on political issues. So, in case it wasn't clear that conservative students are being prosecuted on college campuses, a student senator at Loyola Marymount University was impeached purely based on year-old pro-Trump tweets. This story, courtesy of Haley Worth, our Minnesota campus correspondent. With us today, we have Haley to give us some more details about the incident. So, according to your article, there was a petition to impeach as early as spring of this year. Do we actually know who was behind the initial impeachment attempt and why?
It looks like the initial impeachment attempt was just from a group of various students who saw Martinez, who was the senator, the student that was impeached. It looks like they saw her tweets and just started a petition. They just circulated them and just got it going, and then it just got some momentum. What's interesting, though, is that the timing of the filing of impeachment is somewhat suspect due to the fact that the senator who filed the complaint filed it several days after the student newspaper revealed that Martinez was starting a Students for Trump Instagram page. So why the impeachment complaint was put in several days after then instead of in the spring is somewhat questionable. I did reach out to the senator that did put the complaint in for impeachment, and she never responded back for comment. So there is suspect timing around that.
No, that is really weird. That actually makes it seem a lot more ideological than any sort of action. And I guess that actually brings me to my next question. Why actually go through the process of impeachment as an elected official? I mean, was there any attempt to recall her for not representing the student body? Or was this impeachment based solely around beliefs rather than any actual impeachable action?
The complaint says that it has nothing to do with her political affiliation, and instead it says that she is violating one of the rules that says that you need to be inclusive and represent everybody, and that students need to feel comfortable to be able to come to you. But the thing is that she is a senator for diversity and inclusion, and that includes conservative views, and that is something that she said during the impeachment hearing. And it's just important to note that she was impeached. 18 out of the 21 senators voted to impeach her. So it wasn't even a close call. And it's really sad. You see this all the time on campuses and universities around the country where conservatives are being targeted, and they don't even go to negotiate. They just go right for the get them out of here. They don't even try to negotiate the position at all.
No, that is definitely that's a bit messed up. And again, 18 to 21, that isn't a close call. Do we know why the other people voted against? Did they ever bring that up?
No, I didn't see any comment from any of the other senators. The only one that I saw was from the original senator that filed the complaint. But it's an overwhelming majority. I believe there was one senator who voted not present or wished to abstain or something like that. So they were neutral. But 18 to 21 is not even a close call. So that just brings more, it's more worrisome to the fact that it's just overwhelmingly in favor of impeaching someone just because of their political affiliation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess my final question, though, would be, even if she is impeached, is there anything really stopping the student body from just giving the position back? I would think this might even serve as a rallying point for a lot of the conservative students on the campus.
I'm not sure. She does have a hearing to, let me just double check. It's an appeal for the impeachment, which is going to be tomorrow. And if appeal doesn't go through, if it's just kind of falls apart, then they will go through with the impeachment process. So really, after that, I'm not really sure what is in store for her. I know that she said that the whole impeachment trial was a sham and it was xenophobic against conservative students. So, I mean, at this point, she just might not want to be part of a group that is okay and feels comfortable with impeaching her like they did to her. So, I wouldn't. I would understand her not wanting to go back into that type of atmosphere and environment.
Oh, yeah, that I could understand that. And I guess finally, are there any other details you think that we should know?
No, we're kind of waiting for to see what happens tomorrow with the appeal on impeachment. After that, we'll get more information and hopefully we can be in contact with Martinez about what happened during that. Um, it's just important to realize that the next day, we published an update about a Florida State University student, Jack Denton, who was removed from his position as the president of the Student Senate because of his Catholic views. He stated in a private GroupMe conversation that leftist organizations and BLM organizations don't align with Catholic views, and those the people in that group screenshotted the conversation and posted it on the internet, and it went viral. And so he was removed from his president Senate position. And when Denton got into contact with Alliance Defenders for Freedom, they reached out to FSU to say, you can't do this, you can't remove him just for his conservative beliefs. And the university never responded until they filed a lawsuit against the university, and then he was reinstated. So the university was reached out to once, and then the second time they reached out to him, letting him know that they were filing a lawsuit, then the university responded. So unless you hold their feet to the fire and really try to push back on these universities, they're going to try and do what they can to, silence conservative voices, and it's really sad.
Yeah, and that's pretty messed up on two levels. I mean, first off, not every conservative student is obviously going to have access to legal representation to go off on a case like that. And obviously that shouldn't even have to be the case. You shouldn't have to go after a university with an actual lawyer like that to even get your voice heard or have your hearing. So that is really, really disturbing. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. I'm glad we got to have you on our first podcast here. And I'm looking forward, hopefully we can have you back on sometime.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you. Okay, before we get to our final topic, I have a question for you. Has anything like what we've shown you happened at your campus? Campus Reform is here and wants to know. Head on over to our website and submit an anonymous tip on our tip line. Or, better yet, click on the Join Us tab and become a campus correspondent so you can help protect our campuses from the censorship of the rabid left. So, in really, really weird news this week, a professor from City University of New York authored a New York Times op-ed in which he said that the Democratic Party needs to appeal to the UN if Trump wins, even if the win is legit. A report by Pennsylvania senior correspondent Ben Zyloff points out that in the piece written by Peter Baynart, quote, Baynart further asserted that the Democrats must achieve that margin, referring to the popular vote margin that the Democrats will likely have to achieve in order to beat the Electoral College, in the face of a strenuous Republican effort to ensure that many Democratic ballots are not counted. He says that Trump may not concede even if the Democrats manage to win the election fairly. Now, given Mr. Baynart's history of left-wing writings as a contributor to CNN, the New York Times, and the Daily Beast, including an article titled, I No Longer Believe in a Jewish State, it shouldn't come as a surprise that he might have some problems with our current president. But the call to action he presents is far more radical than most and deserves a special examination. Instead of dismissing it out of hand, let's look at the problem he presents and from there judge if the solution is a reasonable one. In his article, he points to a report from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, a European watchdog group which analyzed the 2018 midterm election and documented so-called undemocratic practices, which, as Baynart pointed out, includes not allowing former felons to vote, not giving DC congressional representation, and, of course, voter ID laws. Conveniently, all of these issues are and have been key liberal talking points. What stands out, though, is that Mr. Baynard is presenting these issues in the context that they are specifically designed to oppress the African American community. In fact, the entire article is based on the idea that the reason the UN needs to intercede on behalf of Biden is because, quote, if Mr. Trump and his allies halt the counting of ballots or disregard them altogether, Democrats should use the OSCE's report as evidence in an appeal to the UN Human Rights Council. However, pretty much all of the reasoning he provides isn't valid. Having to provide a valid ID at a polling station isn't a form of voter suppression. It is basic election security. The reason that the Capitol doesn't have congressional representation is because it's the Capitol. It's supposed to be a neutral ground for the states to all send their delegates to convene in. And of course, when he references Trump's efforts to halt the counting of ballots, he doesn't specify, but the lawsuits that the GOP have been exercising have been cases like Pennsylvania, where they're trying to stop ballots from being accepted 3 days after the election. The common argument given in defense of repealing voter ID laws and the restitution of voting rights for felons has been that black voters are disproportionately affected by them, and any attempt to maintain them is a form of Jim Crow voter suppression. That is simply not true, and there's a pretty easy litmus test to use. Does this law apply to everyone or discriminate against them based on their race? Voter ID laws are universally applied to everyone, and obtaining a driver's license is not contingent upon your ancestry. And guess what? The idea that these laws are discriminatory is in direct contradiction with the facts. This was shown in 2012, where even in states with strict voter ID laws, the black voter turnout was higher than the white voter turnout. And this was according to PolitiFact, who is no friend of the right. That is to say nothing of the fact that it seems pretty racist to suggest that black people are incapable of acquiring driver's licenses. Likewise, felons lose their rights based on their actions, not who they are. If you really want to argue that we should change the laws on what constitutes a felony, that's a different debate, and it should probably begin with a quick read-through of Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill, which focused specifically on enhancing drug criminal penalties, such as cocaine, which at the time was disproportionately used by the African American community as opposed to the white community. All of this, though, is simply it's just a guise under which the Democrats will claim that the election was stolen from them and that Trump won't concede even if he loses. Well, at this point, the claim that Trump won't cede the election is far from new. The call to bring in a foreign power to facilitate the transfer of power, or at the very least intercede, notice that he won't ever actually say anything other than intercede or intervene in an illegitimate election. It's definitely a new one. What's terrifying, though, is that the man is a professor of journalism and is using his position to undermine the public's faith in one of the most contentious elections in history. And what's more, he's doing it while trying to portray his opposition as in the wrong for doubting the veracity of the election. He's not just saying if they lose, it will be due to treachery. He's saying that the only recourse to a loss is to bring in the UN and do God only knows what. So, overall, is it justified to choose to appeal to the UN for an intervention should Biden lose based on a nonsensical report from a group that's been banned by 11 states? I don't think so, especially given that all the grievances listed are entirely under the jurisdiction of the legislation to change. Rather than try to tear down the democratic process altogether with foreign muscle, elected officials should just change the laws they don't like. All right, I want to thank Haley for joining me tonight. This was certainly an exciting week for campus events. And if you like this podcast, be sure to leave a like and a comment. This is a new format for us, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Again, I'm Andrew Covert, and this is Campus Review.